I can share my screen.
Yeah, I think I made you a co-host. So.
Okay, yeah, I'm all set.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Jessica Campbell, and I'm the social worker for the Jersey City Free Public Library. And today we have with us Nicole Melleby, who's a born and bred Jersey girl and an award-winning children's author. Her middle grade books have been Junior Library Guild Gold Standard selections. She's a recipient of the Skipping Stones Honor Award and a 2020 Kirkus Review's Best Book of the Year. Her debut novel, Hurricane Season, was a Lambda literary finalist. She lives with her wife and their cat, whose need for attention oddly aligns with Nicole's writing schedule. Thanks for joining us, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Nicole. I am going to talk today about my third book that just came out, How to Become a Planet. But it is my third book. My first book was Hurricane Season, and then In the Role of Bree Hutchins. All three of them take place in New Jersey, specifically where I'm located in Central Jersey, by the beach area there. Um, but so a brief kind of introduction to me. I grew up in New Jersey, this same area that I write about. I lived here my whole life. I was always a beach kid, so I like to always set my stories at the beach if possible. In How to Become a Planet, the main character and her mom run a pizzeria on the Keensburg Boardwalk, which is a local boardwalk to me. I spent many summers at the Keensburg Boardwalk. We had many birthday parties at the arcades there. Pluto, actually, her best friend in the book, is planning a birthday party at the Keensburg Water Park, and I had many a birthday party there as well. So I like to always put actual locations from my life and in my area into my books, and it's been a lot of fun doing that. And I'll touch on more on that in a bit. So How to Become a Planet is about the main character, Pluto. She recently was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and she's coming off of that diagnosis. And it's the beginning of summer break, so she's kind of navigating now that I have this diagnosis and I have missed a lot of school. I've seen a lot of doctors. I've been going through all this stuff. How do I now kind of figure out how to get everything back on track and basically have the summer that she's used to having? And so it's kind of a journey for her as to what it all means for her now. Not that not that she has depression, but that she officially has that diagnosis. What comes next? So I'm going to read a few pages, and then I have a little presentation I will give just to talk a bit more about kind of my process with writing this, and why I wrote it as well. So when it finally came after 180 long days, the first day of summer break didn't matter to Pluto. The countdown she'd made with Meredith still read 34 days until freedom, because Pluto hadn't been to school in over a month. She hadn't had to worry about end-of-the-year pool parties or endless have-a-great summers, or Meredith begging her to just be her friend again. And finally, she didn't need to worry about school calling home, asking where she was, asking when she was coming, making her mom's voice tremble as she spoke into the phone. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know what to do either. Instead, what Pluto did have to worry about was that her mom was already out of the shower, shuffling around the bathroom they shared, nearly ready to start the day. The hall light was on, bleeding into Pluto's bedroom, making the thick purple curtains that blocked out the morning sun null and void. If she had a bedroom door, she would close it to block out the light and the sound of her mom as she hummed while she got dressed. But Pluto did not have a bedroom door and hadn't had a bedroom door for a little over a month now. Her mom stuck her head in the doorway. Hey, shooting star, she said, words mumbled as she spoke around the toothbrush in her mouth. You're with me today, kid, so start making some moves. Pluto and her mom both knew she would not be making some moves. Pluto resented the fact that her mom even suggested it, that her mom went about her morning as if nothing had changed inside Pluto, as if an endless month in bed could suddenly come to a stop without trouble. When she didn't move, Pluto, I'm serious, as if that made a difference. Pluto was serious too. She needed to stay in bed, under her thick purple blanket covered in white little stars. Her mom had picked out the bed set the moment Pluto outgrew the small wooden crib with the solar system mobile. The blanket was warm and it was soft, and it was not something she was willing that morning or any other to give up. The bed shifted as her mom climbed in, smelling like the Taylor Swift perfume Pluto had brought her for Christmas last year. Her mom's arms wrapped around Pluto's middle, holding her close against the scratchy fabric of one of the low-cut tops her mom always wore that Pluto hated. Her mom's breath tickled her ear. I don't want to pay for a sitter, Pluto. I don't want to pay for a sitter, Pluto. I want you to come with me. Pluto felt a familiar feeling rise from her stomach up into her throat, the one that made her want to scream and cry and argue if only she weren't so tired. Tears came anyway. 12-year-olds couldn't stay in bed all day on their own, no matter how much they might need to. If she was older, an adult, she would stay in bed and no one could force her to do anything, a fixed planet around which everything else moved while she ignored it. But for now, Pluto was the moon and her mom was the planet she was forced to orbit. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. So I'm going to share my screen here. I have a little presentation I can do. This should work. Okay, so hopefully that worked. Okay, great. So again, that's the cover of How to Become a Planet, the book I just read from. So I'm going to talk a bit about kind of my process while writing How to Become a Planet. So here are all the lessons that I've learned. So the first lesson I learned while writing this book was when in doubt, add fire. That ended up not being true, but I laugh because when I was writing How to Become a Planet was my third book. And when I got to it, I had kind of a writer's block. A lot of people talk about a lot of authors talk about when they're writing their second book, that's the hardest book because your first book's out into the world and you're hearing reviews and what other people think about it and all of that kind of gets in your head. I was lucky enough that I had already finished my second book before my first book came out. So this book was kind of functionally my third book, my second book, I mean, let's say. And I had gotten some bad advice that my writing was my writing is very character driven. I always start with creating a character and then I come up with the plot afterwards. And because of that, I had gotten the feedback that my stories didn't have enough plot. And that kind of got into my head a little bit, even though it ended up not being great advice. It got into my head and kind of messed with me a little bit in that way. So when I was working on How to Become a Planet, I actually had this whole plot that I tried really hard to like shove into this book that people were setting fires all on the boardwalk that they were kind of trying to figure out who was setting these fires. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the book. It was a really bad plot that, so I ended up just taking that completely out of the book after I realized it wasn't working. And the rest of the book kind of stayed the same. And the rest of the book was there. So I always laugh that, sometimes not all advice, is great advice. And as an author, you kind of learn your own style and how you tell a story and how you want to tell a story. And just because my stories tend to be more character focused, that doesn't mean that they're, lesser than a plot driven book or that a plot driven book is lesser than a character driven book. There's just different types of storytelling. So yeah, here's an example of when I had the fires in the book. So I have the word fire highlighted there. So, you can see before Pluto could explain, someone bumped into her running to get by. And Pluto noticed that everyone was running and she turned toward the busier end of the boardwalk where a crowd was forming and people were shouting and pointing up at the sky where Pluto saw smoke. Something's on fire, Fallon said. So this was an entire plot in this book. And if you read the book, you'll see that there's no mentions of fire. There's absolutely no fire. So, a lot of changes happened during the process, and that was a big one for this book for me. So again, when in doubt, do not add fire is the lesson there. 2, revise. One of the biggest things that I always tell people who want to write or who are starting to learn how to write, especially, kids who are learning creative writing in schools for the first time, is to not be afraid of revision. That no one's first draft is your best story that you can tell, and you have to be open to continuing to work on it. So for me, here's to show you all of the drafts that How to Become a Planet went through. I think the fires lasted through draft 2, so just to give you an idea there. I took the fires out, I think, at the end of draft 2. So there was a total of 7 drafts for How to Become a Planet. So that's 7 different times that I worked on this story to kind of get it right. The first draft was 41,000 words, and then the 4th draft, so like around the middle, was 44. The final draft is about 54,000 words. So for me as an author, I always have a shorter first draft and I build on it. I like to consider the revision stage kind of like building with Legos, and you have the framework and then just kind of adding to it there, seeing what needs to grow and what needs to develop more. But I know a lot of authors too who end up having really long first drafts and then have to scale it down and find the story that they want to tell. So this is my way of revising. Other people have, they scale it down, so they'll have a really long draft and work backwards almost. So this is actually just a little kind of a sneak peek at after I sold How to Become a Planet and worked with my editor at the publishing house. This was one of the notes that she gave me in what's called an edit letter. So when I was finally, after I had kind of done all the revisions myself to get it to as far as I could, there was still more work to be done with her. And this is a note that she gives me that I actually end up getting a lot. So it's basically about Pluto's good and bad days. She has depression, so she has good days and she has bad days. And she wanted me to kind of vary those days a little differently. So that was the note that I got there. I ended up kind of giving her a really solid day, and a day that wasn't tragic but wasn't great. So I kind of mixed things up. Recently, I also got a similar note in the book that I'm working on with my editor right now, where the main character had a lot of bad moments in a row, and it was kind of really heavy, and she was like, I'm constantly sad for her. So we ended up giving her a really good day where things went okay, and balance wise that kind of helped give the book a breath of fresh air. So for me, I do get this note a lot. It's something that I always kind of think about while I'm working on a book, is just to, does the character need a good day? It's okay to let them have that good day, and they probably should get that good day, so they're not the whole book's not terribly sad. So the third thing, especially for this book, was research. I had to do a lot of research with this book. I have to do a lot of research for most of my books. For hurricane season, which was my first book, there's a whole thing where the main character Fig gets really interested in Vincent van Gogh. So I got to kind of research art and Vincent van Gogh, which was actually a lot of fun because I went to Europe. I went to France and Amsterdam, where they have big museum, the Vincent van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam I went to, and then other places where Vincent van Gogh lived and painted. So that was fun research for me. But for this one, How to Become a Planet, I had to do more science research. So I had to do not only research on depression and anxiety, which, regardless of the fact that I may have experience and I may have an understanding of depression and anxiety, everyone's depression and anxiety can be different and be different for that person, and I still needed to fully understand what I wanted to write about it and how to present it. So I had to do a lot of research on that. And then because Pluto and her mom love outer space and love solar system and planets, I had to do a lot of research in that as well. Science was never really my strong suit, so I didn't really know as much going in. So here are some things that I learned. So anxiety and depression affect a lot of kids, and that's kind of why I wanted to write where the 12-year-old has depression. A lot of people think about depression and anxiety as an adult issue, and it's not just an adult issue. It's very much also a kid issue. I think, especially now with quarantine and the coronavirus and everything, people are understanding that a little more. But at the time that I gathered this information, 7.1% of children aged 3 to 17 have diagnosed anxiety. So that's, a lot of kids. And 3.2, again, at the time when I compiled these stats, of children aged 3 to 17 have diagnosed depression. So I wanted to write this story about the main character having depression because I wanted to show that it's something that a lot of kids do struggle with, and that's okay. Again, and just, anxiety is a bunch of different things. It's being very afraid when away from parents. It's an example of separation anxiety. Having extreme fear about a specific thing or situation, such as dogs, insects, or going to the doctor. Those are phobias. Being very afraid of school and other places where there are people is social anxiety. Being very worried about the future and very bad things happening is general anxiety. Having repeated episodes of sudden, unexpected intense fear, and so on is panic disorder. So there's a lot of different types of anxiety. And it was important for me to understand that when writing Pluto so that I can decide, I can't write a character that experiences everyone's experience of anxiety. So I decide what does Pluto's anxiety look like? And then for depression, again, depression can be different, person to person. So it could be feeling sad, hopeless, or irritable a lot of the time, not wanting to do or enjoy fun things, showing changes in eating patterns, changes in sleep patterns, changes in energy, having a hard time paying attention, and all these other things. So again, I had to just sit and decide, okay, what does this look like for Pluto? So for Pluto, a big part of the story is that she has kind of drifted away from her best friends because for a long time, she didn't want to do the things that she usually wanted to do and the things that she enjoyed, she wasn't enjoying. So she kind of, wasn't texting her friend, wasn't going out to hang out with her. She wasn't, able to go to school some days. So that kind of put a strain on the friendship, and she has to kind of work through that with Meredith, her best friend in the book. Now here's just some numbers since we're talking about depression and anxiety that I like to mention. Just while I was looking up, these were some that came up. I like the idea that you can text if you're not a fan of picking up the phone. I know for some people it's really hard to make a phone call. So there is a line you could text the crisis text line by texting home to 74174. And I specifically wanted to talk about and include the Trevor Project because Pluto does end up having a crush on a new friend that she makes, Fallon, and the two of them end up, in a crush-like relationship. So the book does have LGBT themes, and I make a point in the book of talking about the fact that depression and anxiety does affect LGBTQ youth. So the Trevor Project is specifically for LGBTQ youth as far as helplines go. All right, back to the lessons I've learned. So that was, those topics, those heavier topics in the book are the depression and anxiety. But again, I also had to do other science type research as well. So in the book, Pluto calls the Hayden Planetarium Astronomy Question and Answer Hotline. That's the hotline there. So she calls the hotline throughout the book to ask them questions about different scientific astronomy facts and questions that come up. It's a real hotline. My friend Josh, who writes 7th Grade versus the Galaxy, he's another New Jersey author. We had met for coffee one day, and he was talking about how he called the line because he wanted to ask them a question while writing his book, 7th Grade versus the Galaxy, which is a sci-fi book. As you can see, they're in space with aliens and whatnot. And he called the line because he wanted to ask how far you can hurl through space before you hit something. So he called them, and I was like, wait, this is something you can do. You can just call. So he gave me the idea to put it in the book. So it's a real hotline. I've asked them a couple questions while I was writing the book as well, and anyone can call and they'll answer your questions, which is pretty cool. So here's I have five space facts that I learned along the way that I thought were pretty fun. So space trash. The area of space they make sure is cleared of space debris around the space station is called a pizza box because of its rectangular shape. I thought that was a fun fact because Pluto and her mom run a pizzeria, and I didn't know that at the time while I was writing it. But I love the fact that the two of them love space and they run a pizzeria and it's called the pizza box. I thought that was pretty funny. So Pluto actually got its name, the planet, or the not planet, I should say, got its name from an 11-year-old. So, you know, the same age group, a little older. Pluto's 12 in the book, but an 11-year-old got to name Pluto. She suggested it to her grandfather, who basically was in charge of that. And she got the name from the Roman god of the underworlds. So that was pretty cool that someone around the same age as my main character, Pluto, got to actually give Pluto its name. So the Big Bang, I like this fact as a New Jersey native myself. The Big Bang was discovered by astronomers in Bell Labs, New Jersey. They thought that their telescope was malfunctioning because it detected a background layer of noise that muddled the real data they were after. After the fact, they realized that the noise was actually some of the earliest light ever created. So the Big Bang, the whole creation of the universe, was discovered right here in New Jersey. This is just, you know, something I thought was cute. But Pluto has a heart shape in it, and it's covered by it's made by the frozen nitrogen that's covering that part of Pluto. So you can see there's a heart-shaped spot there, which I think is fun. And then, of course, I had to learn how to become a planet. That's how I actually came up with the title. I literally just Googled how to become a planet, and I thought that sounded, you know, perfect for a title. So it was one of the easiest naming experiences of my career yet. But so a planet must orbit a star in our solar system. That's the sun. So a planet must orbit it. It must be big enough to have enough gravity to force it into a spherical shape. So it must be able to form itself into that round shape that, you know, planets are. And it must be big enough that its gravity would clear away any other objects of a similar size near its orbit around the sun. So it needs to be big and strong enough to kind of keep everything else, that its gravity keeps everything else out of the way. That's actually where Pluto, the planet, or the dwarf planet they call it now, falls short. So it is a sphere, it orbits the sun, but it's not quite big enough to be considered a planet. That's why it's a dwarf planet. So yeah, and then the last thing that I learned is to enjoy it. So after I took the fires out and I found the story and I remembered how much I really enjoy, you know, writing and how much I wanted to enjoy this story and tell this story, I did enjoy it a lot more. I kind of took everyone else's voice out of my head and actually managed to pull the book together and write it. And then I had this little map that my publisher made me that I think is fun that also goes with enjoying it. So all of my books take place around the same area. So they made a map and made a key of things that come up in my books. So you have the full state of New Jersey. It kind of zooms in on the areas that I cover within my books. And then it zooms into Keansburg, which is where this book particularly takes place. So some of the things that, you know, I have fun writing is, so Pluto attended Bolger Middle School, which is a real middle school in the area. I didn't go to Bolger, but that's the middle school for Keansburg. The main character in my first book also goes to Bolger. So I have the Keansburg Amusement Park I have noted here, and the Keansburg Boardwalk there. That's where her pizzeria would be located. And then in the middle picture, you can see I also have, you know, Sissy's Diner, which is a real diner. That pops up in my second book, I think just the second of these three. And that's an actual diner that my dad and I go to all the time. So I like to have fun in that way as well. So, you know, when you're writing, it's fun to kind of poke fun at whatever you can. You can absolutely add different references. As I was writing this, my dad was really excited when I told him I was writing it on the Keansburg Boardwalk, and he had his very, very first job was at this restaurant on the Keansburg Boardwalk where they sold hot dogs, and it's still there today. And so I actually referenced it. I did make mention of it in the book, which made him really excited. So different Easter eggs like that. And something else I like to do is make references to my other books in each book, so you could kind of look for those Easter eggs. Because I was working on all three books sort of around the same time, both the main characters in Hurricane Season and my second book in the role of Bree Hutchins, they eat pizza from Timony's Pizzeria, which is the fictional pizzeria that the characters own in this book. So different things like that I like to do, just to have fun, and sometimes readers will see them. Sometimes they won't, and it's just for me, which is fine, but I enjoy it. So that's kind of that. And that's that.
Thank you, Nicole, for sharing all of that. It's super exciting, and it's fun to see what you put into it. As far as research-wise, to know that it's not just somebody going in and saying, "Oh, this person suffers from anxiety and depression, and I'm going to write about planets," but I know nothing about any of those things. So it's nice to know that you actually do the research and not just talk about things. And you make it realistic, which is great. So I think we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. If anybody has a question, you can type it in the chat. You can unmute. You can raise your hand, whatever you want to do.
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm the LGBTQ librarian at the Jersey City Library. Sorry, I was technical difficultying, of course. Now I picked my rainbow shirt today to wear to represent the rainbow, but now I regret it. I have a NASA shirt, and I should have worn the NASA shirt. That was the first thing I saw. I was like, and mine's a button up that's like without spaceships. It just has the logos all over it.
Oh,
and
nice.
I'm just like, man, we could have matched. It would have been so cool.
That's funny.
But no, listening to your talk, I just appreciate you sharing what process goes into it, because I don't think a lot of people think about it, and how important it is when you're talking about like mental health and things like that, to have it be realistic and supply information that is like something someone can use. And like I really appreciate that. And like if I had this book when I was that age, I would have been like so excited. So it makes me happy to see all the things that exist now for kids, especially like kids with anxiety. Like I had we didn't know what that was. Like that wasn't a thing in the 90s. Like they weren't like, oh, let's help you out, like anxiety. It was just like, you're just a weird kid or whatever. So just this, I don't know, I just love that a book like this can exist, and I appreciate that you do what you do.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
that you have a fun universe. And now it reminds me of Kevin Smith.
Yes.
And he's from right there, like the Highlands and stuff, where it has little Easter eggs.
It's
I
funny,
loved it.
when my publisher put that map together, they copied a map that Kevin Smith's team had put out that looks fairly similar. So yeah.
Because it's like Leonardo, the Atlantic Highlands, like all that, Asbury, Red Bank, all of it's just like, I was just like, this is so cool. Well, I'm glad you know.
Yeah. And yeah, it's funny because with these types of books, they weren't around when I was growing up either. And so people always ask sometimes, are these the books that you wish you had growing up? And the answer is now, yes and no. It used to be yes, and then the more I've been talking to kids now, it's such a different world for them. And there's still struggles. It's still not perfect, but it is such a different world. They know themselves better. They have kind of the knowledge and words to explore and explain who and what they are. So I try and write now not only just for who I was and the types of books I needed, but I try and consider what do they need now, what are they looking for now too, because it is so different.
Nicole, you mentioned earlier about your book that you're currently writing, and I know that one also touches on the LGBTQ community. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have a couple books upcoming. I'll mention both of them briefly. So I have an anthology coming out in October called "This Is Our Rainbow: 16 Stories of Her, Him, Them, and Us." And it's an anthology that I co-edited with an author, Catherine Locke, and it is filled with 16 short stories from LGBTQ plus authors writing about characters on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And it's It's actually a lot of fun. We have great authors. Alex Gino has a great story in it. Ashley Herring Blake has a great story in it. Molly Knox Ostertag has a graphic novel short in it. That's really exciting. And we kind of tried to make it as accessible to any type of reader that there is. So there are, we tried to have as many letters of the acronym covered as possible. We try to make it as racially diverse as possible. We have some stories that skew for an older middle grade. So some of the characters are 13, 14. Some are younger, 11, 12. So we have 2 graphic novel short stories in it. We have a short story in verse in it. That's really fun as well. So we try to make it as appealing to as many readers as possible. And that comes out in October. So we're excited about that. And then my next book will come out next spring. It's called The Science of Being Angry. And that one was a lot of fun to write as well. I explored a really angry main character. She basically has, anger issues. She has violent outbursts that she can't control. She has no quote unquote reason to be angry. She just sometimes sets off and just will scream and get upset and throw temper tantrums basically. And she's 12, so she's, a little too old for what people commonly think of temper tantrums, but she can't control it. And so she is a triplet, and she has 2 moms, and her brothers who she shares DNA with, and her mom who she shares DNA with. She keeps comparing herself to them because they don't get angry like she does. And so she kind of goes through this whole journey of, the donor that was used to make me would those genes contribute to why I'm feeling angry. And she kind of goes through this whole journey of why am I the way I am? Will my family still love me because of it? And this kind of whole journey for her, which was a really interesting thing for me to explore. I like writing, messy family dynamics because it feels real. So I wanted to kind of explore that a bit. So that's coming next May.
That's super exciting. So be on the lookout. We'll definitely be bringing Nicole back to talk about those new stories because she is amazing and we love having her and love being able to share her stories with you all. Does anybody have any other questions? If not, I have a few more, but I want to give everybody a chance to ask. So when did you know you wanted to become a writer?
Yeah, so I'm one of those writers who always knew I wanted to be a writer. When I was about 8, I saw the Nickelodeon adaptation of Harriet the Spy. And in that, she carries around a notebook, and the whole thing is that she writes in this notebook everywhere. She spies on people. She constantly is writing in it. And after I saw that movie, I basically made my parents buy me notebooks every other week, and I did exactly the same thing. And eventually, instead of just jotting down, random notes, I started telling stories, mostly ridiculous stories about, me and my cousins who we were close in age. So fun little adventures that we went on. But gradually, I kept at it, and it's something that I never stopped doing. So I always knew I wanted to be a writer. The path to get there, went a little all over the place. I didn't necessarily know if I should major in it in college because people said, you never know if you're going to make money off of it. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And so I went back and forth for a really long time. And then after a while, I decided, what, this is what I want to do. This is what I love to do. I'm going to pursue it anyway and see what happens. And so I'm glad I did, obviously. But for me, it's what always made me the happiest.
And my last one that I have is, what advice would you give these young readers that want to pursue writing?
Yeah, so besides, revise and don't be afraid to revise, which is always my number one. It's also, you have to kind of, resilience is the key. You have to be okay with and be ready for rejection and not let that completely derail you. Rejection is going to happen at every stage of the writing process. You can get rejected before you get an agent. You can get rejected before your books get published. Even after you publish, 1 or 2 books, your next book could get rejected. There's rejection all over the process. And you kind of just have to keep going and be okay with that. Take a day and wallow in it, but if you can't let it make you stop. If you want to be a writer, you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing. If your story is one that you believe in, keep at it until it gets there, basically. So there's a question in the chat. What inspired you to be a YA author? I always knew I wanted to write for younger audiences, especially when I started writing seriously. Along the way, while I grew up, I tried to write older stories and whatnot. But once I decided this is what I wanted to do seriously again, I knew I wanted to write for younger audiences. I think because I wanted to explore the themes and ideas that I wish I had in books growing up, like the LGBTQ content. It felt more natural to kind of want to explore it for younger audiences and write for them instead of for adult readers. And I don't regret it. I also, people have told me that, while writing, if they've read my older stuff, that my natural voice is in the younger age bracket. I don't know what that says about me, that my natural voice is that of a 12-year-old, but that's something that it always came easier for me. And I really like being able to play in those worlds a little bit. I once heard middle grade described as being, having to write a character who finds their place within their friends and family. And I really liked that idea where, as a 12-year-old, you're not really independent. You can't kind of have those coming of age moments on your own because you're surrounded by adults who make a lot of decisions for you. You have, friends that you're still growing and developing into. So I also really like exploring those dynamics as well, which makes it, more fun to play in this audience as well.
All right, does anybody have any other questions for Nicole before we wrap up? All right, well, I wanted to say thank you again, Nicole, for being vulnerable and sharing, your stories with us, your personal, information about you and why you decided to go this route, and for telling us about what's coming up next. That makes me very excited, and I look forward to having you back with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for everyone who was able to come out and watch.
All right, everyone, have a good one. Thank you again, Nicole.
Yeah, bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.